In April of 2026, something quietly broke inside Florida's economy, and almost nobody outside the unemployment office noticed. Initial jobless claims jumped 51.9% in a single year. Then, on the 2nd of May, Spirit Airlines shut its doors for good, and in one stroke, nearly 4,800 Floridians lost their jobs, including 2,529 at Fort Lauderdale alone, and another 551 at the airline's headquarters in Dania Beach. The state had already shed almost 38,000 jobs over the prior year, and unemployment had ticked up to 4.7%, higher than the national rate. For years, every warning about Florida real estate was about hurricanes and insurance. This one is different. This one is about the paycheck. Because in a town that leans on a single employer or a single industry, a wave of layoffs does something no storm ever can. It takes away the buyers and creates desperate sellers at the very same moment. And a housing market that looked perfectly stable can give way underneath you far faster than anyone expects, not because of the weather, but because the jobs that paid the mortgages simply disappeared. So today, I'm going to show you 10 Florida towns where exactly that risk is building, where one industry quietly holds up the entire local economy, and what the latest numbers from Zillow and Redfin say about how exposed each one already is. I want to be honest with you from the start. This is a warning, not a prediction. Not every town on this list will see prices fall. But by the end, you will know precisely which Florida towns are standing on solid, diversified ground and which ones are standing on a single paycheck. Let us count them down. And here is what makes the timing dangerous. Even before these layoffs fully land, the Florida housing market has already cooled. According to Redfin, the typical home in the state now takes about 69 days to sell. There are more than 200,000 of them listed, and only about 1 in 10 sells above asking. In other words, the buyers were already thinning out. Add a wave of layoffs on top of a market that has already lost its momentum, and you have the exact conditions these towns cannot afford. Let us count them down. Number 10 is Gainesville, and on paper it looks like one of the safest markets in the state. According to Zillow, the typical home there is worth about $295,000, and values have actually climbed more than 4% over the past year, while much of Florida softened. So why is it on a layoffs list? Because that strength rests almost entirely on one institution. The University of Florida is not just the biggest employer in town, it practically is the town. Tens of thousands of jobs, an enormous student rental market, and a local economy that rises and falls with one school's budget and enrollment. As long as the university is healthy, Gainesville is golden, but a town built on a single institution has very little to catch it if state higher education budgets ever tighten. And that is the quiet fragility hiding underneath a rising price. And student towns swing harder than most because so much of the housing is built for renters and investors rather than long-term owners. When enrollment or university funding moves, it does not just touch faculty paychecks. It moves the value of every rental house bought to serve them. Number 9 is Tallahassee, the state capital, and it has the exact same shape of risk. The typical home here runs around $285,000, and the market has held roughly flat, neither climbing nor falling much. Tallahassee runs on government, state agencies, plus Florida State University and Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University anchor almost everything. For decades, that was the ultimate safety net because government jobs do not vanish in a recession the way private ones do. But a government town is only ever as stable as the government budget behind it. Hiring freezes, agency consolidations, and spending cuts all land here first and hardest. And when your whole housing market is underwritten by one payroll, a tight budget year is no longer just a headline. It is your home value. And government towns tend to attract careful, long-tenured buyers who assumed their jobs were permanent, which means that when cuts do come, the shock is psychological as much as financial. A town that believed it was recession-proof is the slowest to see the danger coming. Number 8 is Lakeland, sitting right in the middle of the Interstate 4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando, and it is the beating heart of Florida's distribution economy. This matters more than it sounds because transportation and warehousing make up the single largest share of all the mass layoff notices filed across the entire state. Lakeland is anchored by enormous logistics operations and a few very large employers, and the typical home here sits around $290,000. The vulnerability is automation and freight. When shipping demand cools or a warehouse brings in machines to replace shifts, the cuts come fast and they come in bulk, and Lakeland has built a great deal of its recent housing on the assumption that those jobs would only ever grow. Transportation and warehousing alone account for the single largest slice of every mass layoff notice filed in Florida, tens of thousands of affected workers, and a town that positioned itself as the logistics capital of the corridor has tied its fortunes directly to that one exposed sector. Number 7 is Ocala, and here the warning has already started flashing. Ocala became one of the fastest growing distribution hubs in the country, a town of giant fulfillment centers and freight corridors. But according to Redfin, the median sale price has already fallen more than 5% over the past year, to around $275,000, with homes now taking roughly 96 days to sell. That softening is happening while the warehouses are still running. If the logistics hiring that built Ocala ever slows, the housing that was thrown up to shelter all those workers has the least cushion of almost anywhere on this list, because so much of it was priced for a boom that was supposed to last forever. Redfin also shows that a striking share of recent buyers here have been searching to leave rather than to arrive, which is exactly the kind of quiet signal that shows up in the data long before it shows up on a for sale sign. If this is the kind of breakdown you would rather see before it shows up on your own street, do me a favor and tap the like button, because it genuinely helps push this in front of other Florida homeowners who deserve the early warning. And the next few towns are where the risk gets much more concrete. Number 6 is Pensacola, out on the western edge of the Panhandle, and its economy rests on 2 pillars, the military and one enormous financial employer. Navy Federal Credit Union is the largest private employer in the entire region, and finance and insurance happens to be one of the top sectors for layoffs across Florida right now, with national banks filing for thousands of cuts statewide as digital banking thins out the back office. The typical Pensacola home runs comfortably below the statewide figure, and Redfin shows houses sitting around 100 days before they sell, which already favors buyers. A single giant financial campus holding up a city is a tremendous strength, right up until the day that one employer decides to trim, and then there is no second engine to absorb the blow. To understand the scale of it, this one credit union employs tens of thousands of people across the Pensacola area. A campus that large does not just provide jobs. It sets the rents, fills the restaurants, and underwrites the value of entire neighborhoods. Concentrate that much of a city's income in one organization, and you have concentrated its housing risk in the very same place. Number 5 is the Melbourne and Palm Bay area on the Space Coast, and this one is built on defense and aerospace. The region is anchored by major defense contractors and the launch economy, including the sprawling presence of one of the nation's largest aerospace and defense contractors. These are excellent, high-paying jobs, but they share one dangerous trait. They are driven by government contracts, and contracts get canceled. Brevard County home values sit in the high 200,000s and have already eased over the past year. The thing about an aerospace and defense town is that the layoffs do not trickle in. A single canceled program can erase thousands of engineering and manufacturing jobs in one announcement, and there is no slow warning before it happens. The Space Coast learned this lesson once before, in the years after the Space Shuttle program ended, when thousands of skilled jobs vanished and local home values felt it for years afterward. The names of the contractors have changed, but the single industry dependence has not, and that is the part of the story most new arrivals do not know. Number 4 is Daytona Beach, and this is the town on the list where the floor is already moving. Daytona runs on tourism, hospitality, and motorsports, the most cyclical industries there are. Hospitality is one of the very sectors driving Florida's rising layoff numbers, with national chains already shuttering restaurant locations across the state. And the housing tells the story plainly. According to Zillow, the typical Daytona Beach home has fallen more than 8% over the past year to around $259,000, the steepest decline of any town we have named. Tourism towns always feel a downturn first, because the moment travel budgets tighten, the hours get cut, the seasonal jobs vanish, and the people who serve the visitors can no longer afford to stay. You can already see the early edge of it in the restaurant sector, where national chains, including names like Bahama Breeze, have been quietly closing locations across the state. Each shuttered restaurant is a few dozen more service workers competing for fewer shifts, and in a tourism town, those workers are the renters and first-time buyers who hold up the bottom of the market. And once that bottom starts to slip, it pulls the rest of the market down with it, because the entry-level buyer is the foundation every move-up purchase is built on. Daytona is not a warning about what might happen. That 8% drop already on the board is what it looks like once it has. If you have made it this far, you already understand this better than most buyers ever will. So stay with me, because the final three are where the risk stops being a theory and starts showing up in the actual prices. Number 3 is Jacksonville, a city most people think of as too big and too diversified to belong on a list like this. But look closer and you find an enormous concentration in one vulnerable sector: finance and insurance. Jacksonville is a back office and call center hub for some of the largest banks in the country, the very companies that have filed for thousands of layoffs across Florida as they automate and consolidate. The typical home here sits around $300,000. The risk is quiet and structural. You do not need a single dramatic shutdown to hurt a city like this. You just need a steady drip of back office roles being automated away year after year until the buyers who held up whole neighborhoods are simply gone. 2 of the largest banks in the country alone have filed for thousands of Florida job cuts between them. And a city that built its middle class on stable office work is uniquely exposed to a kind of slow, quiet erosion that never makes a dramatic headline but steadily removes demand from the housing market one department at a time. Number 2 is Orlando, the theme park capital of the world and the perfect example of a giant city that still leans on essentially one thing: tourism. When the parks are full, Orlando is unstoppable, but tourism is fragile, and Orlando just felt that fragility twice over. Spirit Airlines, before it shut down, employed thousands of people across its Orlando operations, and its failure erased roughly 1,600 Orlando jobs almost overnight. The typical metro home still sits near $390,000, but a city whose entire identity is built on visitors is only ever one travel slowdown away from trouble, and the airline that just went under is proof the warning is not theoretical. And tourism does not lay people off politely. When visitor numbers dip, the hours get cut first, then the seasonal contracts, then the full-time roles, and an enormous share of Orlando's workforce lives paycheck to paycheck in exactly those positions, glorious in a boom and badly exposed the moment the visitors slow down. Before I reveal the number 1 town, which is the actual epicenter of this entire story, there is one resource worth knowing about if any of these towns hits close to where you live. I keep everything in one place. A single breakdown of 40 Florida towns, 20 that are genuinely worth buying into right now, and 20 worth staying well away from, each one with the specific reason attached, including the employment risks we have just walked through. If you want to see which side of that line your own town falls on, the link is waiting in the description. But stay right here, because the number one town is the place this whole story actually began, and right after it, I will give you the single pattern that ties all 10 of these together. In number one, the epicenter of this entire story is the Fort Lauderdale and Dania Beach area in Broward County. This is where the spark actually landed. Spirit Airlines was headquartered right here in Dania Beach, and when the airline shut down, it eliminated 2,529 jobs at Fort Lauderdale and another 551 at its Dania Beach headquarters in a single round of filings, the largest mass layoff notice in the state. This is not a town that might face job losses someday. It is a town that just absorbed thousands of them. Broward home values are among the priciest on this list, and the surrounding region has already begun to soften, with nearby Palm Beach County values down over the past year. When that many paychecks vanish from one concentrated area at once, the pressure on housing does not arrive in 12 months. It arrives now. And aviation is one of the most concentrated industries there is. The mechanics, the flight crews, the gate agents, the corporate staff, all of it clusters in a handful of zip codes around the airport, which means the job losses cluster there too. When a single employer that large disappears, the damage is not spread thinly across a region. It is poured into a few neighborhoods all at once. So there they are, 10 Florida towns and one pattern running underneath every single one of them. Here is the pattern. It is not really about Spirit Airlines, and it is not really about any one company. It is about concentration. Every town on this list leans too heavily on one employer or one industry to carry its entire housing market. A university town, a government town, a logistics town, a defense town, a tourism town. When times are good, that single engine looks like a strength because it pours stable, well-paying jobs into the local economy year after year. But concentration is a hidden fragility. The very thing that makes a town prosper in the boom is the thing that makes it dangerous in a downturn. Because when that one engine stalls, there is nothing else running to keep the lights on. A diversified city loses a few jobs here and a few there and absorbs it. A single industry town loses them all in one announcement. That is why a place can look completely healthy, with rising prices and quick sales, right up until the week it does not. The more of a town's paychecks come from one place, the further it has to fall when that place stumbles, and almost nobody checks that number before they buy. Now let me be straight with you. A strong local employer is genuinely a good thing, and most of these towns will be perfectly fine. Gainesville is not falling tomorrow, and neither is Tallahassee. This is about exposure, not destiny. So when you are deciding where to buy a home in Florida in 2026, do not only ask what the house costs. Ask what pays for the houses around it and how many different industries hold up the town. Because the safest housing market is not the cheapest or the prettiest. It is the one that does not lose everything when a single company sends a single email at 3 a.m. That is the lesson Spirit just taught an entire state. Thousands of families went to bed believing their jobs were secure and woke to a single overnight email telling them they were not. You cannot control whether that happens, but you can control whether the town you buy into can survive it. Now I genuinely want to hear from you because the comments on these are always the sharpest part. What is the biggest employer in your town? And be honest, if that one company or that one industry disappeared tomorrow, what would happen to your local housing market? Drop it below, because someone scrolling right now needs to hear it. And if this video gave you a way to see your own market more clearly, please hit the like button and subscribe. Because these employment numbers shift every single month, and I would rather you hear the next warning from me than read about it after the layoffs have already been announced, because that is exactly what is coming next. There is a second group of Florida towns where the job still looks secure today, but the early cracks are already forming: the quiet hiring freezes, the contracts not being renewed. When those towns turn, they will not give you the courtesy of a slow goodbye. So stay with this channel, and we will name the Florida towns whose paychecks are about to disappear before the country sees it coming.